Okay, I might get things started. First up, I want to introduce, welcome and thank the panellists for today. I am not going to be reading out their bios. That would take all of the hour that we have available to us, so I don't think that's the play. But I would like to welcome Steve McDonald, Rob Adamson, Ivan, Gustavino and Dave Lowy.
Good name.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Michelle Carey. I head up the Digital Earth Knowledge Business Unit within IMDEX. For those of you who know me well, you know my job title has changed a fair bit over the last 10 years or so. Very excited now to be at the start of what we call our Digital Earth Knowledge Business Unit, bringing together a lot of the different groups that we invested in over the last little while. So exciting times ahead. So obviously we've been talking, you've been listening to lots of IMDEX and IMDEX partners talking about our solutions over the course of this afternoon. We thought it would be a great way to end the day though, to really broaden the view out a little bit, invite some external perspectives as well, and really put a capstone on the discussions and the things that we've been looking at all day. So lots of people have asked me how the heck I chose this panel, and i.e. what the heck was I thinking when I chose this panel. A couple of things went into my decision-making process. So obviously all of these people have been in the mining technology industry for quite a long time. I might have heard other people, not me, call them the grumpy old men of mining technology. So I know that they have very strong and well-informed views about what we need to do as an industry, and I know that they like to share them. Now, quite often that sharing happens in bars. I've been very fortunate to be mentored by all four of these people over the course of the last 15, 20 years of my life. So that means I absolutely know what I've gotten myself in for. I have tried to set some ground rules. Let's see how I go and how much control I've really got. Having said that, I didn't set very many rules. One of the commitments was that this isn't a formal panel. You know, I guess we've all seen reasonably formulaic discussions happen. We are intentionally going to keep it a little more free form than that. So those are the rules as they stand. Right, so before I get started, Dave, you told me that you've brought a prop for today's conversation, which is, you know, not unusual for you. So I don't know what you want to share.
Is the prop the glass of red wine or this book? Right, so I just brought this up. I met Lena Rhodes today. She's over in the South Building. And this book, when I picked it up, it's called Penelope the Miner. It's a primary school book about mining for kids. And it just reminded me when I looked at it that Horizon 3 innovations in the industry come from all sorts of places. And one of the things we need is more technical people available for our industry. So this is a bloody good place to start. Please go and say hello to her. I intend to take this book into Australian primary schools and give us some support to do that. But just a reminder that if we think too linearly, we miss some opportunities to do things which affect the industry. So, and she's also a redhead.
Yeah, okay, I can see that my control's loosening really early. Fine. So I did set one ground rule, and it was around, you know, obviously we sit on the mining tech side of the industry, you know, we're the technology companies rather than the mining companies, although most of us have had roles that span across both sides. So our intent is for this to be a positive conversation around what mining technology companies can do, rather than a rant about what mining companies won't or can't do. Having said that, I have no doubt that a couple of times we'll stray into that territory, but that is broadly our intent. Okay, so, you know, where I wanted to start the conversation was around a theme that hopefully played through some of the talks earlier today as well, is that we think it's incredibly vital that mining tech players collaborate with each other. None of us have all the capabilities and all the tools to solve all of the problems that need to be solved by this industry, and so none of us can do it alone. We need to be able to work together to do it. Now, we all say that, and we all say that to each other. For the record, I've been in a number of meetings today where I've said it. But I think in reality, we find it quite hard to do. And so I'm going to ask the panel to share their thoughts on why we find it so hard to do and what perhaps needs to shift so that we can collaborate more effectively between ourselves. And Steve, I'm going to start with you. Ivan told me I wasn't allowed to start with him. And he also told me that I sent out a briefing email, which he told me today that he didn't read because he wanted to keep things fresh. So I'm going to do him the grace for the first time of not going to him first, but it may not last. Okay. Steve.
All right. Well, firstly, thanks for the invite, Michelle, the slightly Freudian slip of Steve McDonald. And I know in your head you were thinking the old McDonald had a farm, part of these 4 old farts at the front here. But thanks for the invite. I guess one of the big challenges that we have here is that this opportunity space for building an effective digital ecosystem spans the entire sector, and from sort of cradle to grave, if we want to call it that. And I had the sort of privilege through my career to be able to start an exploration, so the beginning of the cycle, and I think the team have given a very good sort of set of exposés and discussions today about the challenges and data collection and custodianship and how we actually process it to take it to making good and informed decisions. But effectively that is the beginning of the journey. It was somewhat bookended by Brenton's discussion at the end about geometallurgy and that final description of a piece of data that describes a piece of material that goes into a process to be turned into something else. And in reality, what we're trying to do is turn rocks into cash. At its most simplest, to be able to do that in a energy and a capital efficient, recovery maximised, value maximised way. But the interfaces that we create in our sector are really the thing that is the blocker to a lot of the innovation. So without going negative, we have come from a sort of very traditional, very sort of hardwired HR-led organisation that is very hierarchical, top-down, sort of management structures where we segment a linear value chain into vertical silos. And so what happens is that we essentially optimise in the verticals for something that actually is a linear process, pit to port, whatever sort of phrase that you want to do. So we sort of get in our way, in trying to get at the things that we need to do to drive better efficiencies. And for a long time, where the way that we trained people was very hands-on, if you like, apprenticeships. And so a lot of it was to imbue our processes into our people through these reinforcing mechanisms. Actually, the digital piece works against that. So we're going from tribal knowledge to now we're actually trying to model the most effective system view of how we get at what I always describe as 3 things we're trying to balance. So the triangle of cost, risk, and value. A lot of people argue with me about the cost and the value. Aren't they the same thing? And I say no. Not really, because the value is described in many different ways. So how do we sequentially reduce risk? How do we create more value at the same time, being capital and operational cost efficient? And that expresses differently in exploration, through studies, through construction, through commissioning and operation, all the way to closure. And so I think, I just thought I'd sort of set that as the framework to set Ivan up now that he's had sufficient time to say, Ivan, where would you go from there?
They're good. I like that they're self-organising. This is getting better.
Well, I think it was about collaboration, right?
Yeah.
So, I'd probably chunk it up to say, or try and simplify it. And I don't think any of the tech players understand collaboration, probably would be my opening stance on that. And any attempt in terms of collaboration moves to contract pretty quickly and doesn't keep the customer and, the experience and the value being delivered to the customer. and there's generally a winner and a loser. And I think that's a critical issue for mining tech guys and how they operate and how they pretend they're partnering, because there's an effective loser in that partnership generally. And I think fundamentally, if you can change that to a shared win situation, we could maybe have an impact.
Do you think that there has to be a loser? Do you think it's, is it possible to make that change?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's possible. I think it's just a lack of understanding what collaboration means.
Rob, you look like you want to dive in.
Well, I can give a very current example where we've got what I think is absolutely the duck's nuts in terms of sensing, but it has a very narrow range for sensing minerals on a conveyor belt. But it doesn't need calibration. So once it's set, it measures really accurately at high volumes. But it doesn't sense some other elemental minerals. So there are some technologies that do that, but their calibration is all over the place all the time, and it's a pain in the back. So we had this great idea of if we could calibrate with one of these groups, we could actually use our accurate sensing to constantly calibrate their sensor. So the next discussion was, who owns the joint IP when you've done it? Because these technologies are very complementary, so that's got to be a win-win. Who owns the IP? Who owns the client? I don't want you to talk to, but hang on, we talk to them all the time. No, but we're better placed. We're a much larger organisation. And then probably the other key element in getting collaboration working is trust. And you walk in the room and the body language is like this. So work on all of those things and you can...
Less time on contracts, more time on relationships?
More time on relationships, less on contracts, probably less on worrying about IP. Just own what you've already got. That joint thing produces a better outcome, and that's got to be a good thing.
Dave?
That's a good comment, but I'm going back to some of my very early and quite violent training by Ivan in business with the mining industry. And one of the first rules of that is always own the customer and always protect your IP, come hell or high water.
Yeah, and that's the problem.
Otherwise,
joint IP.
Otherwise, you lose the value, you become the loser, right? But I think that's illustrative. I'm just giving you a real-time version of some of the impediments.
Body language.
But related to that, I think also is the industry itself is so, even one company, if you're trying to take technology to one company, we all suffer from the multiple pocket syndrome. So you talk to one part of a business, it has a pocket, you talk to another part of the business, it has a pocket. The money you make for one part of the business goes into its pocket, but the money comes out of someone else's pocket who doesn't realise the gain. And that to me, especially if you're a relatively small technology company trying to take it in, is a really difficult hurdle to get over. I think the other thing is our industry is not big, actually. No. It's not very big at all. And if you look, if you're going to make a product that's going to service the mining industry, there's about 600 or 700 mines in the world that you have a possibility of selling anything to. That is not a big market, right? So it doesn't engender massive investments. I'm not saying we want to do things like what's going on in Silicon Valley at the moment, but the industry doesn't really have the scale to support the investment it needs to get right ahead. Now, that's a bit negative, but if you look forward, you've been around this long enough, right? Still alive. But I think if you look ahead, I think it is possible with the contention, with copper at the moment, it's musical chairs, no one's actually finding any new copper, that if the resource industry companies start to form larger JVs to take on more risk and prosecute more larger and more risky projects, I think if you have projects like that happening, that will be a pull for the technology service providers to pull themselves together to serve really large projects like that. So I think that's one way we can get pull from the mining industry to pull us along.
Yeah, so make the size of the pie big enough that it's more likely that it can be win-win.
Yep.
All right, I think, I promised that we wouldn't talk about what mining companies could or shouldn't do, but I think this is one place where it would be interesting to talk about a little bit, and, maybe comes back to something that you've said, Ivan, which is around this idea of customer-led. But, how much do we think the resource companies have to force us to play nicely together, as opposed to, is it just to them to Dave's point, make a problem set that's clear enough that we naturally collaborate? How do you think about that?
I don't think about it too much, actually.
Fine.
To be honest. Sorry about that. But but I'll have maybe there's a chance to redefine what a customer is, and not take that view anymore with where we're at and what's changing and the speed, and what the economics are demanding from us. It probably needs to be readdressed, and from that, trying to struggle and go back in and change something that's pretty bureaucratic, entangled, and old. Maybe some lifeboat type of attempts at trying to crystallise a new model might be something I would suggest is or could be welcome in terms of the miner changing from being the customer.
It's definitely one way to change.
Yep.
So, Steve, when you were, you play on both sides of this fence. When you're sitting resource company side, how directive have you ever gotten in terms of asking technology companies to work in a collaborative manner? And has it ever worked when you've done things like that?
Yeah, look, we've certainly tried, and the areas, there are many places where you would want OEMs and vendors to come together. To Rob's point, you can see, clearly that two technology providers, they have, 1 + 1, but actually coming together could be a 4 solution. So to try and, do a little bit of, bringing them together and seeing if there's a way that, we could incentivise them to play nicely, for people that historically have been, fierce competitors. I think the challenge always with that on the mining side is the little bit that we've already said about gain sharing. So in order to do that, you actually have to create an incentive. So two things. You have to create an incentive for the vendor space, the technology providers, to come together and do something that perhaps had been deemed to be slightly unnatural from history. But on the same side, normally what the resource companies forget about is the fact that they don't change any of their rules internally. So you haven't gone and adjusted your procurement organisation and their KPIs, which is essentially about screw down the cost of all inputs to the lowest point, and be fairly aggressive. And until you actually go back into your own shop and deal with KPIs that are not aligned to the new mission statement, it's not going to work. And that was sort of why I wanted to sort of set that scene about we've got this very hardwired, hard-coded industry, run into these silos, these very hardwired verticals. So even the best mining companies in the world, when they go and deliver their plan, they essentially are delivering the most highly optimized suboptimal plan you could deliver. Because in essence of the human HR structure and all of the incentives that are layered around, which drives their behaviours and how they play. And so normally, when they come to the technology providers, it is with a club. And it's much more threatening typically than it is partnering.
Yeah.
And so again, there's a whole bunch of things that we need to lean into here.
Yeah, I definitely want to pick up this thread around what the relationship between resource companies and tech providers should look like. But I might turn to you before I do that, Rob. And how often do you see mining companies coming to you and say, because I think some of the equipment that you deal with as really good examples, you've already given one. I think the way your sensors can be used on sorting equipment's surely another, where partnerships would be natural, but who drives them?
From a mining perspective, I think they just want solutions. So And as technology companies, I think we're far better placed to know where things are complementary or work together, etc. I think from the miner, what the miner can do best is facilitate an environment that allows you to put the tech in to run that's not
Procurement-led.
procurement-led.
Yeah.
So the environment, they can set the environment to facilitate it. And then probably the most important thing, particularly for my companies are not as wealthy as IMDEX, and just a little bit of empathy would go a long way from the mining company perspective. You know, just not beat the bejesus out of you.
Yeah. I too have been trained by Ivan, by the way, so if we beat the hell out of people, that's actually his fault. Yeah. I like that though. Empathy is nice. Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, obviously this is something, we IMDEX have tried to do a fair bit of, and probably, maybe to some of the conversations about whether or not it's truly win-win, we don't actually have that much success in asking other people to be collaborative with us. How do you, what do you think we should do differently?
I think we have a language problem when we talk between ourselves and the mining companies, and just at the NBRU meeting just yesterday, I think it was yesterday afternoon, we're sitting there talking, and I was struck as we were all talking about applications of geoscience and geoscience sensing right through from exploration into mining and production. And I just drew a line down the page and said, one side of the page is the Da Vinci of geoscience, the other one is the Amazon of geoscience, right? And you need to talk about both of them entirely differently. And when we confuse them and talk to the wrong audience in the wrong way, especially when you get to the mining industry for geologists, they just go, these guys are just crazy, literally crazy.
Yeah.
We don't understand the word they're talking about or how it applies to us. So I think that's a language thing. Then the other one is the dollar articulation thing, which no one does well, including the mining companies themselves. And I actually think until we can properly model and articulate the actual dollar value of technology, do it properly, taking into account risks and all those sorts of things, then we won't get too much further ahead, but neither will the resource companies themselves be able to advocate internally to adopt those technologies for their own benefit. Right? So I think that's a really key bit of language that we miss outside of all of that. And the other thing I wanted to say about technology and mining companies is often really long trials of new technologies are ultimately value destructive. Right? They achieve very little unless they're designed very well, unless you can get it in and get out really quickly. If you're going to trial something for 2 years, I think as service providers or technology providers like us, we should go, yeah, no. And you might have some opinions about this one as well, Rob, actually.
Yeah, I feel like this could be a really open wound. I'm getting a little nervous. Yeah. But it's a good point too, and I think it probably links back to that value of information piece as well, is if you can't run a trial whose end point is to say, this is the millions of dollars of value that have been unlocked or de-risked. Yep. Brenton obviously did the right thing on his slide and said, it's millions of dollars, but of course we want it to be a hard number. Really.
Proper number, yeah.
Cool. All right, so maybe turn to industry dynamic a little bit and dig into a bit more. So, I've been part of the sector, not as long as the grumpy old men of mining technology, but quite a long time now. And I've seen it evolve quite a long way. I think we're all calling ourselves technology companies. I think when I first joined IMDEX, we called ourselves a drill supplier, probably, or something like that. Or we were, and in general as an industry, we were called suppliers, right? And you could feel the power balance in the language that's used. I think increasingly we are positioning ourselves as being, technology partners to mining, but there's still, if you look at a parallel industry like oil and gas, it's much more parity, right? Some of those big tech providers are truly equal partners with mining customers. I'd be interested to know the views of people, whether they think we can get there and whether actually, is that a positive thing for us to get there, and what does the industry look like if we do? And maybe, Rob, I'll start with you this time.
Look, the balance is, in my view, the balance is changing because the value levers, the big uplifts are coming from the technology providers. So you've got grades, all body grades declining, and the days of a bigger truck and more scale no longer really apply. So you have to get a lot smarter about it. So if companies want to do that, they have to talk to the technology solution providers. I think what we have to do is probably make you talked about a trial for 2 years. We had one for 10 years running on a site until anyway. But yes, I think we need to be solution providers. We need to be better at integrating it across multiple silos. But yes, I think the balance is shifting, and it's in our favour. The mining companies no longer have the last big tech revolution in mining, in my view, happened in the 70s, flotation and things like that. But mining companies at the time all had big research laboratories and big science teams. They've all gone. So the balance of power is shifting in the technology provider's direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and there's a shift of talent as well. I think, similarly, I would say when I first joined IMDEX, if I'm really frank, lots of people did ask me, what the heck, you're a geoscientist, you got a PhD, you used to work for BHP, why on earth would you go and work for a dirty supplier? And I think that dynamic has changed massively, and we are legitimately seen as, sometimes probably an employer of choice rather than an employer of last resort. Rob said something there, Steve, that I thought would be interesting to throw to you in terms of that, that internal R&D effort that sometimes happens within the bigger companies, and again, how you think that balance is going to play over time. The dreaded IP word, I'm sure, is about to come up in this conversation.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, of course, I think it was, if you go back sort of to the 70s, 60s and 70s, there really wasn't any other place to go and get that technology. So typically it was big research laboratories run by the larger at-scale companies, even the mid-tiers, would have had significant IP capabilities at the time. There's trends in sort of business optimization, the rise of the management consulting world that tells you there's a better way to drive, earnings and efficiencies in a corporation. And so, you have all of the pressures of those kinds of things that were sort of more top-down. We just don't need them. We'll let somebody else do that work. Who that was, who knows? Partnering with those organisations, the Amiras of the world and what have you, became important. Yep. As a sort of a pseudo-collaborative environment, is a sort of an exchange for ideas. You'd hope that the universities continue to do good work, and national laboratories around the world, the likes of CSIRO, obviously for Rob and the team, very important place, to harvest, technologies done in a national lab setting. What we know is all of those things are becoming very fragile. And you really can't rely on that for a lot of the deep foundational science that sort of underpins how to, and this is more probably at the operating asset level, how to make improvements there. What we've seen though is that other sectors are doing extraordinary things. So we're here to in essence try to wrap a digital bow around all of this. And we're in another revolution. In that digital space. Now we're branded an AI revolution, but really it's just the next wave of something that's been coming again since the 70s. And in all of those old R&D departments, national laboratories, universities and elsewhere, actually the fundamental science of many of the models have already been built to a large degree. Now they need that IP, quote unquote, needs to be dusted off, brought back out, put in, programmatically brought back to life and executed back into the businesses. So I think there's a different challenge for us, as we move forward, is there's probably less truly fundamental science issues that need to be resolved, and now it's how do we optimise actually for this enormous treasure trove of things that we already know, but for some reason aren't
Aren't actually
actioning.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the really big opportunity is.
So, Ivan, M&A's your bread and butter. How much, you've watched the tech sector. One of the other things that's driving this is how much the tech sector's been aggregating in mining and consolidating. How much further do you think that's going to go? Are we going to end up with someone SLB sized at the end of this? And, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think, a couple of things there. I think the M&A is going to continue for...
You're incentivised to say that, to be clear.
Yeah, but probably, what is the tectonic shift in that is just the legacy that is being piled up in companies through that M&A, and the inability to actually materially get probably the returns that a lot of those bigger groups have swallowed up, and trying to operationalise them and get them to deliver succinctly as a brand is a massive issue that they're contending with. So I think another 10 years of that aggregation is going to happen, but while that's happening and everyone's building on that particular old model, the geopolitical drivers have come in and they've changed everything and nobody's awake to them. And I think that's going to be the bigger undertone to what we're going to see in deal making and what we're going to see in new organisational structures that are going to come sideways at this and outmaneuver that end state is something.
Yeah,
I
think it's an interesting mix of visible and invisible what's going on, right?
Yeah.
There's a everyone's talking about things like there's lots of VC cash flowing into mining,
Tons
but
of
we
it.
all it's actually there's geopolitical the people behind those VCs are not very far away from the centres of government, so
Yeah, definitely.
It is pretty interesting to watch.
Yeah, it's a big undertow under there. And, it's going to be some surprises. I think.
Dave, you've been on, I've been on this journey with you, maybe is the right way of putting it, rather than the other way around. How do you reflect on that same 15, 20 year, next 10 years out kind of journey?
I'd like to talk to that, reflecting with something Steve said actually. And I think one thing we don't appreciate is the big mining companies losing their internal research capability and backing of the Amiras. Or Camiro is another one here, for example.
Yeah.
And the fact that they no longer exist in the big companies means there's no one in the companies to receive the new bright ideas that thinks the right way. I mean, the big mining companies have basically chased anyone that's remotely neurodiverse out the door to just get that conformance and governance in place. So there's a lack of people who can think entrepreneurially and innovatively to tackle people like us and have the same conversation. It's actually really difficult. Or someone that can have the conversation with us and has the power to do something about it. I had the unfortunate experience once of travelling to a mine site to run an innovation session and an entrepreneurship session. And I opened it up by saying, you're all on here FIFOing and you're here for 7 days and gone for 7 days and back for 7 days. You haven't self-selected to be an innovator or an entrepreneur. Let's just start with that. Now we can please talk about continuous innovation instead, right? So I think those mindsets are now few and far between in the industry, and I think that's actually a bit of a problem now. And we've got to the point now, and this is not my saying, it's someone else's, but the industry can't read the label from inside the bottle. I think it's a really good statement, and I think we're building ourselves further and further into the bottle and whacking the cork into the top of it. And to what you're saying, Ivan, what comes in from the side, and I think we need something to come in from the side that goes bang and just wakes us up, breaks the bottle, in fact.
Yeah, I think disruptors are interesting. Steve, where else do you think disruption could come from? Do you think? I think geopolitics is definitely seems like one of the most obvious lenses right now. Is it going to be the US government and the Chinese government basically either directly or indirectly pulling the strings?
Well, I mean, we can certainly see that the rules-based system, the sort of global free trade system is breaking apart. And so we're moving back into blocks, and so that's definitely having an impact. So we've got the sort of the macro of the geopolitics at play, absolutely. We've got the other ones where we actually, notwithstanding all of the sort of negativity that we talk about, the global economy is actually doing reasonably well. And so, global GDP growth is pretty good. And we have these two other megatrends at play. The energy transition, despite what happened south of this border, has essentially continued to pace through the end of 2025. When you look at all of the statistics on solar rollout and wind and batteries and EVs and everything else, and then on top of that, again, we now have this AI arms race. And so that is an arms race, so that is akin to nuclear weapons. And these are all, materials intensive things that are going on. So again, that's driving governments to now deploy a lot of money to worry about supply chains, to now worry about wars and other things, and worry about the digital war of AI. So we're actually in an unprecedented environment, as a sector where the sector's probably never printed as much cash as it is doing today in terms of margin expansion. So what is it going to do with that to make really big bets? But that digital piece is the disruptor coming from the side. So the companies have a broad understanding that there's a threat and a risk in this. So they've got this huge demand piece that's driving it at one side, but they've got this potential disintermediation that's coming into their business about business plans, how I use AI, how I transform my business. The fact that we're no longer graduating enough graduates across our sector, whether they're geoscientists and geotechnicians, mining engineers, metallurgists, what have you. Although some numbers are starting to turn, where that takes a long time for us to be able to claw back. Any of the things, and unfortunately the colour of the hair at the front here of this non-diverse panel tells us that we also have a bit of an extinction event coming as well, and it's wonderful to have IP sitting in a cupboard, but actually the scars of the engagement with the enemy, our sector, are really powerful things to actually allow you to work out how to innovate and how to do the unlock, because we know how not to do it. So whilst you have that, we need to sort of use the capability, those that are for change, to actually help the unlock for the companies that are wired in a way that really prevents change happening at the pace and scale that it should.
So I think it's at PDAC that your famous quote occurred, isn't it, Dave? What percentage of the industry did you say had to die?
Half.
Amazing. Yeah. So hopefully not the people in this room. Let's assume you've self-selected to be on the 50% who get to live. I think
The older half, I might say, so that the younger people come through.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, sort of helping, sort of not. Oh, okay. So maybe let's talk about AI a bit now. I was on the road with Paul a bit this week during Investor Round, and there was a lot of, what's it called? The SaaS-pocalypse. The SaaS-pocalypse. So there's all sorts of things going on here where AI is going to destroy the value of software companies. AI is going to completely change how a mining company works. Maybe a relatively open question about threats and opportunities and how you guys all think about it. And Ivan, I might start with you.
Okay.
I told you I was going to give you one free pass.
You got me starting the last one. It's not fair.
It's all right, he'll take it out on me later. It's fine, don't worry.
Yeah, I mean, Steve said AI's been around for a long time, and so this is now just the acceleration. I think really it's our inability to respond to the speed at which the AI is coming on that sets either the opportunity to grasp, grow, and take advantage of that, or probably die. Would be the radicalness of what I see happening in the way AI is coming through.
Is it affecting the sorts of companies you choose to invest in or support? are you already shifting
Yeah.
a portfolio?
Yep. For instance, Atrico will get its portfolio together and just get them to hear the latest
Yep.
leaders in this area globally, and then have them reflect. We're not going to lead that, but have them reflect about whether they should shift course already,
Yeah.
because it is that fast and it's that type of impactful.
Yeah.
And I think it's just that whole, how do you grasp it? How do you, create value, and how do you make sure you've got a moat? And little plug for IMDEX, no longer on the board, but I do think the IMDEX strategy and what was in place while I was on the board is, very well thought out one, where we've, at that time integrated with, getting access to raw data and just even the pathway of controlling data and actually understanding the quality of data so those decisions could be made, those layers that are coming on, is where value is going to get created. But if you can't understand where that's emanating from, and you've got anything from, trash data to hallucinations, don't worry, Dave, it's okay, mate. Don't hallucinate here. But that level of complexity is what we're dealing with, and you have to know what is in that stack and how you're doing that. And people don't understand that fully, and they could be, we're just seeing decisions made poorly on the basis of bad data.
Yeah.
That's propagating. To me, it's just a speed of change that is the human responding to that is the problem.
Yeah.
Not the AI. It's gonna have a big effect.
Yeah.
And you need to change strategies today, or you're dead.
You did.
Yep.
So Rob,
That's my view.
Rob, you deliberately play in hard tech. How do you think about this?
I think AI is going to be increasingly commoditised, and it's just a tool that anyone will be able to use. So, software businesses beware. But I think where we can do a whole lot better is sensing technologies. At the moment, lots of the touch points in mining, the data you get, which means that the AI models don't work particularly well. So the strength in making the AI work really well is quality sensing. So if you want...
Freudian slip. Yeah.
Freudian slip into IO there,
IO,
was it, Rob?
yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
Freudian slips all over here. It's fun.
So if you want a big idea, you could climb out of the geological predictive silo. You could predict it. You could send it across to Chrysos and Nextdoor, and we'll sense it.
We're doing real-time collaboration. I like this. This is good.
There's a collaboration there, so we're now across into what goes in the plant, and then improve it, learn from it, and create the whole circle. But yeah, I think AI will become commoditised. It's actually hard tech stuff, and that working a whole lot better that will allow us to reap the benefits of AI in the mining industry.
Steve, you spend quite a bit of time as our most recent interactions when you were chair of Data Rock board, making sure that Data Rock was AIing itself whilst it busily AI'd the industry. So I know you have very strong views on this. What do you think is going to happen next?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, so what Michelle is referring to is was how do you actually build a company where you have incessant focus on cost to operate, cost to serve. So can we build systems and processes, our middle and our back office, to be as efficient and effective as possible, where the friction to scale means we don't need to add people. So we're using, systems that are self-service, for HR, for finance, for all of the touch points for our staff to the greatest extent possible, which means that every dollar that you have, especially as a startup, is focused back on the key mission of growing the company, building your products and getting to market as quick as possible. And there's no doubt that tooling is already extraordinary and is only going to get better. I agree with Rob, completely commoditised. But the beauty is, we've got billions of eyeballs in this game and a lot of credit cards, and so the depth and breadth of that tech is going to be extraordinary, and we will benefit from it. But we have to be ready and we have to be in the right mindset to really grab at that as an opportunity. And again, those are the sorts of things that will then come back into the big, slow, inefficient, clunky, bureaucratic, our customers, the mining companies, which have to radically change also their cost to serve. One of the things that's really clear is in this commoditized, generative AI world, it is moving so fast. One of the other challenges is what you couldn't do 6 months ago, you can do today. Yeah. And so one of the deep things that this sector does continuously is, I've tried that, it didn't work. So you go, and it was a decade ago, ore sorting doesn't work. I did that. So when did you do it, and on what basis did you do it, and and on what commodity, and and no, it doesn't work. And so things may well.
Put in the 50% that Dave's killed off in
some and the problem is sometimes you have to wait quite a while, and so the value foregone. The value foregone is extraordinary, and as Ivan said, grades are falling. So we're now confronted by constraints on energy consumption, materials consumption, grinding media, etc. Everything, water, the amount of dust we produce, the amount of tailings we produce. It's getting harder and harder and harder and harder. But there are actually suites of tools that today could make fundamental, huge value unlocks and also decrease your risk by reducing wet tailings going into dams and doing all sorts of other things, and we're just not getting at it.
Yeah, it's true. Dave, you're an early adopter from way back, so...
Oh, yes, yeah. I made a comment at a talk I gave, I don't know, last year sometime, and I think John and Ann Thompson were there, actually. And I was... Here we go.
Absolutely not.
But one of the quotes on my
last
slide was, it's not a serious industry, actually, and I will go to what Steve was just saying there. It's not actually serious about changing itself. It really isn't. It pays very little attention to it, invests almost no money in it, and really doesn't have the appetite for it, at least publicly. I had the pleasure of visiting Google X on the way here in San Francisco, and being a technology dork like me, it was fantastic. But my takeaway from visiting them was they operate with a lot of money, obviously, but a 10-year time frame. Right? They have a 10-year time frame to develop technology. And they were showing us the Loon balloon, which they were going to use before Musk upset all of that with his satellites. But he said the Loon balloons they worked out weren't actually going to work. But what they worked out when they were working on the balloons is a laser system to transmit data at absolute gigabytes per second. And he said that they can use lasers to send data, and I think he said at 7 or 8G. And I said to him, what the hell's 7 or 8G? Right, but they built it and it's sitting there, and they're looking at now commercialising that. But that came out as a side project or something which was only, related to it over a 10-year long time frame. Those time frames and those levels of investment and perseverance are really hard to find in the mining industry, I think, for whatever reason. And to come back to the AI thing, and Steve knows I've been looking at a lot of these things as well. There's AI, there's generative AI, there's language models, yes. But what's happened in the last, really, if you go back to Google AlphaFold, right, the Google DeepMind thing that was designing proteins, that was actually a few years ago now, so it wasn't yesterday. But I think what the AI world is latching onto is physics and thermodynamically constrained AI, which is difficult. But if you think about it and you look at it, you'll see just in the last 3 months, there's been a hell of a lot of noise going on, and that's where the money's going. So I think the language model stuff will get commoditised. It'll just be a business-to-consumer thing. Businesses will use it. I don't even think it's going to be particularly a step change. I don't know. But relative to getting predictive material science, engineering, thermodynamic things going, having the best brain in the room that's read 1 million papers and can actually use those 1 million papers to predict things and generate the next experiment to develop something new, that is absolutely going to be amazing. And you'll read, if you look up the Genesis mission, which is what the US government has announced funding of in late December, they have charged 17 American government departments with getting on, no mention of ChatGPT, get on with science-informed models. Get on with it right now, here's the money. And the US government equates it to the Manhattan Project. Right? So if that's going on over there, and we've just been talking about our mining industry sitting over here, how are they going to meet? How do we engineer? In fact, for us, to the positive side, how do we engineer the meeting of those two technologies? That should be the positive takeaway.
It was for you, very positive, Dave. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to ask us to finish off. This is a choose your own adventure. You get to do one of two things. We've got a fair few smaller mining tech companies sitting in the crowd, so you can either give, you all work in this space. What's the one piece of advice you give to a startup at the start of their journey? Or you can give IMDEX a piece of advice. And that does not mean me. I'm not asking you to give me personal advice. I'm going to make that a clear differentiation. But yeah, you can choose one of those two things. I'm going to go from that end of the table. Steve.
Oh, okay. Well, look, I think, I think when we look at, I'll do the IMDEX piece because we look at, the journey of the company, the evolution of the strategy. And we talked a couple of times here, the oil and gas industry is differentiated by having these large players in the middle who are technology aggregators. And different dynamics. There's a sort of very different history about how they got there, but these are very significant at-scale players that are essential for the operation of modern oil and gas industry. And so, whether it's IMDEXs or others, the quantum of the offering needs to be sufficiently, fulsome that you have meaningful partnerships. So it's not a supplier, it's not a master-servant relationship anymore. You're a critical part of the tech stack. The piece that we sort of haven't really got to yet today is for all of, there are millions of sensors now all over modern mining operations. And these things are, emitting and transmitting all sorts of information. Seldom is it actually making its way to, being used in the most optimized way. The data historians are just collecting vast amounts of data, throwing it into data lakes, and then a bunch of people in very unstructured ways are trying to do meaningful things in this sort of swamp of the data swamp. So a re-architecting of the underlying IT OT infrastructure. So what happens is everybody forgets the operational technology side. So the integration into the PLCs and the SCADA systems that actually allow that piece of information collected on that drill rig, going through a drill and blast into a load and haul to a crusher onto that conveyor. We lose and we seldom, I think we said, we just use grade as the proxy. I think it was Brenton that said for that, but there's so many other attributes you could be describing to get a better recovery performance, a better whatever the performance is of that material, the one shot you get to mine. And so that data swamp, I think, is actually where the vendor environment can demonstrate and create so much value. And actually the tooling that the hyperscalers are building actually largely to solve their own problems of their own middle and back offices are such a mess that I think there's huge opportunity coming, here where we can actually go and very cost effectively start to attack something, the tech debt or the technology tax that is carried by every mining company today. So, so for IMDEX, I think, to extend and accelerate that vision and try to navigate to a place where you can have a bigger role because the opportunities are outsized in both directions.
Rob? Thank you.
I'll take the simple one, the technologies to scale. I think if you're thinking of scaling tech in the mining industry, or putting any tech in the mining industry, it's been over 50 years since the last tech revolution in the mining industry. So you're dealing with 50 years of really established habits, and you're dealing with an incentive system that's been around for a long period of time. And don't underestimate the incentive system. So we had real-time grade monitoring, tier 1 copper mine, and the system kept breaking. And you go back and look at the data, and we found that between 1 a.m. in the morning and 4 a.m. in the morning, the ore body had no grade. And the general manager's KPI was tonnes, and he would blame the geological model.
Easy to blame geologists. It's a known fact.
So, incentives.
Incentives and change. Ivan, particularly nervous to ask you this question, but, you know.
Yeah, well, the first thing is don't come into the mining industry if you're a startup, right? Because there's better ones to go after.
Right.
So let's start there. Let's just go for it. But I think probably on the positive side, most of the groups that are in mining tech are still effectively price takers. And anybody that wants to have a go should, and if you can hit the value props that have been discussed up here, should start aggressively going after value pricing and not broad markets, not the 600 sites that everyone mentions and how many underground, but go after the ones that are ready to go and address those key problems, but go with a value pricing model and stick to your guns.
Nice. Nice. All right, Dave, you get to close it out.
All right, I'll talk about startups, because that's my background.
Probably for the best.
Yeah. Well, one thing for IMDEX, can we just get some more speed on the ball? That's all. Anyway, I'll stop.
Anyway,
House.
House.
I like talking to small startups after wearing the lots of scars of doing it myself. But I always round them up and say, look, cash flow is king. Never, ever take your eyes off cash flow. Especially if you're bootstrapping, if you're taking money in from VC firms or whatever, do not take too much too early, because that will always kill you. 20% of your problem is the technology. The rest is all to do with humans, yourselves and your customers. If you start the company up with the idea that you're doing it to make money, you will fail. You'll absolutely fail. And there's all sorts of Venn diagrams of startups and technology. The one I like is, does it break the laws of physics? No. Great. Will people pay for it? Can you get value for it? Excellent. But the third one people always forget about is, are you or your company the right company to take it to market? It may be better off somewhere else. And often people don't think about that last bit. So that's the Dave download on startups.
Very good. Nice way to end it. Thank you. I want to thank my panellists. So they were actually very well behaved. I'm very appreciative, I think, for that. Thank you to all of you who stuck around as well. This is our first time running an event like this at PDAC. I think it's been really valuable for everybody. So thank you all for coming along, and please feel free to come and ask the panel difficult questions at the end. Thank you.
So Dave, I'll give you our template. It's got a